watching Twin Tier Sunday with Jennifer Sheahen.
Welcome to Twin Tier Sunday. I'm your host, Jennifer Sheahen. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Sunday. We have a very special episode for you. I'm at the Clemens Center, a place for theater, a place where people often go to just get lost in their imagination, maybe just for an hour or two. But today, for this half hour, I want you to get to know it and understand it as a historical landmark for Elmira. Take a look.
The Clemens Center is a concert and theater venue in a town known for its very rich history. Today we show you some of the highlights of this theater, starting with the heart of the venue.
This is the third console for the Mara and Colton Theater organ that originated here in 1925. The organ has been lovingly restored and worked on by David and Lauren Peckham. It's been out of the building for about 8 years. And just this past spring came back to the building in this wonderful state. Not only does this make music through air, but it also makes piano sounds, bird calls, sirens, all of the things that you would need.
With over 1,600 seats and a revamped stage, the possibilities for the shows are endless.
Okay. The balcony in the theater now holds about 600 people. When it opened in 1925, it held 1,000 people. About 400 seats were lost in the balcony in the renovations after the flood of Hurricane Agnes in 1972, when 30 feet of the building was chopped off. That included the original lobby, which would have gone straight out from the back of the seating here, as well as storefronts along the street level, and the balcony cantilevered out over all of that. That space now is occupied by the southbound lanes of Clemens Center Parkway.
The venue is named after Samuel Clemens, whose pen name was, of course, Mark Twain, and was often a resident in Elmira when writing his books.
And in this last renovation, we moved the back wall 15 feet to give us 40 feet of space, 5 feet of additional space, so that a performer going off one side can go behind the set and make an entrance from the other side. The rigging here is the magic. It's all counterweight system with cast iron weights to offset whatever is hung above us. In theater world, it's fly space. Things fly up, things fly down. And that counterweight system creates the opportunity for curtains to disappear, lights to disappear, and stage props, including during our production of the tour of Miss Saigon, we flew a Jeep. We flew a helicopter that went up out of sight from the audience up above us here, all from that counterweight system.
Tom then explained what the dressing rooms looked like way back when in 1925.
The space that we're standing in right now would have been a dressing room, and behind this door in that little space was the only toilet. There were no showers. There was one toilet backstage. All very tiny, small dressing rooms. The stars had dressing rooms here, below street level, but closest to the stage. Once we move down this hall a little bit, we'll move from 1925 to 1987, when we added more dressing rooms and our 200-seat performance space, Mandeville Hall, named for David Mandeville's father and grandfather. David was a wonderful philanthropist in the community and member of the Board of Trustees for many years.
And maybe some of you didn't know, but there is a smaller stage within the Clemens Center known as Mandeville Hall. It can convert into almost any kind of stage setting and is perfect for local theater groups and schools. The rich history of the venue comes to life with every performance that graces its stage, becoming a vital part of the community's spirit and entertainment.
Now Tom WEIDEMANN joins us. He is from the Clemens Center. Why don't we start off with your title here and what you do?
Jennifer, my title is Executive Director. I supervise the staff, I do strategic planning, and I do fundraising.
A task that not many like to take on, but you do.
People begin to cross the street when they see me coming.
But this place needed a lot of fundraising because it's an old place and lots of restoration.
An incredible history.
That is right. Why don't we start with the history? Let's go back to when it first opened.
Okay. Well, it first opened in 1925, as a matter of fact, on the winter solstice, December 21st, 1925. And when the theater was built here, there were a dozen other theaters doing vaudeville in and around downtown Elmira. Elmira was the queen city of the Southern Tier back then. Okay. So when this theater opened, it was right on that cusp of moving from vaudeville to the silent films. And so this theater actually opened with a film. It was Cecil B. DeMille's 10 Commandments was the opening performance here on December 21st, 1925. The newspapers at that time talked about the theater in terms of one of the most beautiful theaters between New York and Buffalo. Now, I emphasize talk. Usually when theaters open, there's a wonderful photograph of the orchestra or something, oh, prim and proper. Apparently the photographer was sick that night. There's no photograph in existence, but there was a lot of article talking about the beauty of this theater, 1925.
That is amazing. So it started way back when.
Way
Why
back.
don't you tell me a little bit, why did they decide to make it a movie theater and not a full-fledged theater?
They were trying to keep ahead of the curve, and so in 1925, the silent film era was beginning, and the silent film era really got its start in Ithaca.
Oh, really?
And in this region was one of the hotbeds of the early films, the melodramas. And so this was to offer a new form of entertainment. It was also built for vaudeville, so there's a full stage house for productions, there are dressing rooms. So it was doing a little bit of both.
That is amazing. Now, tell me a little bit about kind of how things progressed and why it was the most magnificent place between New York City and Buffalo.
In the 1920s, late 19-teens and 20s, there was an incredible burgeoning of performing arts centers across the country. It was a golden age of building movie palaces. Places that were bigger than life, that got you out of your sense of self and put you in the place of a spacious area like a king would sit in. And so it was an opportunity to sort of forget the troubles of the early part of the century, the Depression, and then into World War II as this went along. You could escape it all and come here and be in a different world. And so the buildings were all designed with that grand scale to give you this sense of being larger than life.
That is magnificent.
And it continued as a movie theater. The first interruption in that schedule was 1946. 1946, for the locals, dates the first major flood in downtown Elmira. And at that time, I have a picture of the theater back in 1946. The water at street level was about 3 feet deep, and we're about 2 feet below street level now. So the water would have been about here in 1946. So it caused a great deal of damage, including the theater organ, and one of your camera shots shows the theater organ sitting behind me.
That's right.
It did not used to be there. It used to be on a fixed platform over in the corner of the stage as the audience looked at the stage to the left, and it could not move. So in 1946, the console was under 5 feet of water.
Oh my goodness.
And it was carried out in several wheelbarrow loads.
That is ridiculous. Now, when did this organ originally, when this place opened, was this put here as well?
It was one of the features, one of the great features of the theater when it opened in 1925 was this Mark Holton theater organ. It was designed to augment a pit band and create all the sounds so that when you watched the silent film, you would have all of the emotions, all of the natural sound effects, all were created by this wonderful instrument. And they were always in a fixed position on an elevator that would drop down so that the audience could see over the organist and then come back up. In 1946, it was flooded. The chambers around us where all the music is made were fine. The console was destroyed. And so a console was located outside of Buffalo, and a new console, that console was brought in. That console lasted, oh, and the other thing that happened in 1946 was a real revolution in the film business. Revolution was CinemaScope. And to this building, CinemaScope meant make that room disappear. All of the ornamentation, all of the color, all of the chandeliers were removed.
Oh, really?
Blue Naugahyde was put on the walls, which was the modern look, and everything was to be focused on the large screen on stage.
Which is kind of like the way a modern day movie theater is.
Yes.
Kind of bland on the inside.
And that's where that began.
And how did that work out for the Clemens Center?
It was still at that point it was the Elmira movie theater, and it was a very successful movie theater. 1946 to 1972, when the second major flood hit downtown Elmira after Hurricane Agnes, and once again, we're about 4 feet below street level, 3-4 feet. It was about 8 feet deep here.
Oh my goodness.
Everything was destroyed once again, and this time the movie operators kind of gave up. So it was at that point that urban renewal took a look at the damage along what had been State Street, one of the major retail streets in Elmira, and determined that a new 4-lane arterial would be built. All of the damaged buildings on both sides of State Street would be torn down to make room for this new 4-lane.
That's incredible. Now, I think that's somewhere where we're going to have to start
Okay,
right after
we'll
the
start
break.
right after the break.
Because you were telling me about it in the lobby, and it was absolutely incredible how they redid the streets and redid this building. So you're going to want to stay tuned and learn more about how they rebuilt this beautiful theater.
Twin Tier Sunday will return in a moment.
All right, welcome back. We learned a little bit about the 1925 all the way up to, 19, where are we now?
Well, we passed 1946 and the change in the building that took place after the flood of 46 when it became CinemaScope and all of the ornamentation disappeared. And now we're to 1972. It is June. It's been a very wet winter and Hurricane Agnes sweeps through the Northeast. Once again, the river floods. All of this is underwater. And at that point, the theater operators gave up. Urban Renewal decided it would tear down all of the buildings along State Street. This theater used to front onto State Street. Yeah. So this building was scheduled for demolition. When a group of citizens got together and said, isn't there some way we could keep the old Elmira movie theater and turn it into a live performing arts center?
Yeah.
So a study was undertaken and they determined that yes, the original storefronts, the original lobby, 30 feet of building that used to extend out beyond us here when we take our walk, Jennifer, 30 feet of the building was torn off. The original facade, the original marquee, all of that space is now where the southbound 2 lanes of Clemens Center Parkway go.
Oh my
so that
gosh.
goes right through where the front of this building used to be. We lost about 200, 250 seats in the balcony that used to extend out over those storefronts. So they cased the building in this new facade, made it look kind of new, sort of like Lincoln Center. Sort of surprises people.
When they
First
walk
time
in.
they walk in, it's a very modern lobby, and they walk into this room. But at that point, it became a nonprofit organization. All of the movie equipment was taken out, and it became a place for the live performing arts, not only national and international touring artists, but also a place for the resident population to create performances, create music, create dance.
That is beautiful. Now, you said it was a very bland movie theater
Very
at that point.
bland.
At what point did you guys start adding in all the detail and intricacy again?
When the nonprofit took over the organization, all they could afford at that campaign was to make it clean. So all of the walls were painted white. It was a very clean building. And for, well, let's go in 10-year increments, Jennifer. For 10 years, the center operated, and it brought in large name performers. But after about 10 years, the cost of big name performers was rising. The ability of the organization to program enough of those was becoming a real struggle. Yeah. And so in 1987, the theater, with a grant starting from the state of New York and then augmented by a grant from a local philanthropist, added a black box theater, a 200-seat theater, flexible space, where we could sort of experiment with different kinds of performances, chamber music, stand-up comic, local theater productions. And it gave a lot more activity in the building than just waiting for those performances where 1,000 people could come in. That was 1987. The theater is still all white. And it wasn't until the late 1990s, about 10 years after that, that the organization started saying, it's been 20 years since we took over the building, the roof is leaking, there are problems with the electrical, the plumbing is ancient, we've got to do something. Yeah. And out of that came a 20-year building plan.
Oh my goodness.
That said, what have we learned in the first 20 years? And what can we project as going to be happening in the theater world over the next 20 years? How will we make this facility work? And so at that point, a study was undertaken, and the consultants said, we've got 2 problem areas. One is, how does the public arrive at the building, see the building, and how does the public become comfortable in the building? And then the second, what about the performers and the crew that make the magic happen?
Yeah.
In 1998, we tackled the first part, the public. We enlarged the lobby. We tripled the number of restrooms. We put new power into the building. We created an arrival court on Railroad Avenue to get people away from having to stop on Clemens Center Parkway, safely drop off people. 1998. About 10 years later, 2008, we undertook the second phase, which was to create primarily a space for the performers. And the issue there was that our stage depth, from the curtain that would drop right behind us to the back wall of the stage, we had 31 feet. And the standard in the industry since the mid-1800s for the depth of theaters was 30 feet.
Oh, okay.
Every vaudeville production, all of the performances, if you had 30 feet of space, it fit. Except along came a show called Phantom of the Opera. Perhaps you've heard of it?
Yes, I have.
Did pretty well for itself. It was in a theater that had a 40-foot depth.
Oh, no.
And it began a trend where more and more of the productions coming off Broadway and touring were built on sets that needed 40 feet. We had 30 feet. Our major renovation in 2008 was to take our back wall and push it back far enough so that we could then accommodate anything that's on tour.
I see.
That was the major thrust. That was the $11 million piece of construction. To move that wall, to redo all of the rigging and the magic equipment that makes theater happen here was about $11 million. And at the time, we said to ourselves, well, we could undertake this project, finish it, have people come in, and they would look around, and from the audience standpoint, nothing had changed. What have you done with all of our money?
That's very true.
So we added the restoration of the interior of the theater. We had a company come up from New York. They were able to do studies to tell us precisely what this looked like. There were no photographs. What did this look like? What were the colors? What were the design? What was the ornamentation from 1925 to 1946 when the movie theater obliterated it all? And we recreated it. So as we walk, and as you see behind us, you see precisely what an audience member coming here on December 21st, 1925, that's what they would have seen.
That's
these
incredible.
colors, these patterns, this seating.
That's incredible. Now the paintings on the ceiling, which you'll see in
Yes.
detail in just a bit, let me tell you, they are beautiful. Or was that hand painted, or was that?
It was hand painted, and in particular the mural right above the stage here. It's an interesting story. When the nonprofit took over the organization, everything was painted white. So we had assumed that that mural had been taken down somewhere back in the 1940s, 50s, because everything was white. The architectural firm said no, it was still there. They had simply painted over it year after year after year.
Oh my goodness.
So when we were doing the restoration, this entire room was filled with scaffolding. They were able to get up to that mural, take the canvas, it's on 5 pieces of canvas, take it off of the wall, take it to their studio, remove enough paint to say, we know what this picture was.
Oh my gosh.
Now they couldn't save the fabric, so what's now here is an almost exact replication. Only one thing changed. The photograph is from Greek mythology, and it is the 9 muses of the arts guarding the garden with the trees with the golden apples that were a gift to Zeus. The muses were to guard the trees so that no one else could eat, and then they put a dog or a dragon, you'll see up in the mural, to keep the muses from eating the fruit. The restoration of that work. In 1925, women did not work in paint studios in New York. So the women's faces on those muses from 1925 until we restored it were stylized female faces. Part of the crew that did the restoration were 5 women painters, and they used each other as models. So when you look at those faces, those are the women who repainted
That's so
that for us.
cool. That's incredible. See, this place is full of history. It's a historical artifact. You just have to come see it. And even if you don't come to see a show, which you have to come see a show, but even if you don't, it's absolutely breathtaking inside of here. So when we come back from the break, you're going to learn more about how you can come inside, what you can see, and the shows that are coming your way.
Twin Tier Sunday will return in a moment.
welcome back. We just learned a boatload about the history of the Clemens Center. Now we're going to be learning about the future of the Clemens Center. And why don't you tell me a little bit about the plans for the future and how you plan to revive theater, which is sometimes considered a dying art now, but maybe that will change for us.
You know, one of the things that happens in theaters now, and more so as we move into the future, is it is where a community comes together. When you think about it, there are very few places where 1,000 people will gather to share an experience. That's what we have here. And so the future of the performing arts, while it may shift over the years and the kind of performances shift, there will always be a desire and a demand for a place to come and laugh, cry, clap together. That's what we do here. We primarily host, the Clemens Center primarily hosts the national tours of Broadway musicals. We also do some pop attractions. We rent the facility to commercial promoters who will bring in Sesame Street Live. Coming up next month, Bill Cosby.
Oh, I love Bill Cosby.
And we also provide space for the resident population to create. Elmira Little Theater, the Orchestra of the Southern Finger Lakes, dance companies, choral groups. In addition, Jennifer, it's not just those organizations, but this has become the center of the community. So there are over 20 organizations that will use this facility for announcements, for receptions, for fundraisers, for some of their activities. Everything from fundraisers for the Arctic League, a favorite charity during the holiday seasons, to Red Cross blood drives, to wedding receptions. All of them use our facility here.
Which is great.
Looking into the future, there will be more of that. We have the facilities now that can handle any Broadway production on the road, and that will be the solid anchor of future here at the Clemens Center.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear.
Wonderful upcoming performances. We're just about to announce, in fact, at the performances this past week, we gave a little tickler announcement to the audiences that our Broadway season next year will open with the Broadway musical Anything Goes, followed by Sister Act. Then there's a wonderful Broadway musical that we're still negotiating, but it's going to be announced soon that everyone will be very excited about.
I better be the first to know.
It will, you will, you will. And then Memphis, and then we close next season with a production of Guys and Dolls.
Oh, beautiful. I was in Guys and Dolls, you see.
Well, 100,000 people a year come through this facility, which is pretty amazing. In a county of less than 100,000, 100,000 people come here and enjoy the arts, share that experience together.
Now, a lot of your crew and everything here are volunteer. How can people get involved with that?
Sure, just call the Clemens Center. A couple of times a year we do orientation and training for volunteers, and all of our front of house staff, that's the ushers, the ticket takers, the concessionaires, are all volunteers. Everything backstage are professionals. Heavy equipment, very dangerous, so we use the local stagehands union, and we have 2 on-staff stage managers that coordinate all of that activity.
That is wonderful. So there's always ways for you to get inside, see a show, volunteer, come and give, you know, fundraisers,
make a donation.
Things. Make a donation. Always welcome.
We rely on that, Jennifer. Just a quick plug. We need about 1/3 of our budget. We have about a $2 million budget. We need about 1/3 of that donated. Or the facility ceases to exist in a community this size. So we do rely on the generosity of the community.
Now, where can people go to donate?
They can go to our website. They can call us here at the Clemens Center. There are materials anytime they come to a performance that they can take. They can become members, which guarantees their tickets if they have to do refunds or exchanges, all kinds of benefits.
Wonderful. All right. A very exciting time. I hope you enjoyed your Sunday. I know I have.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for being on the show this week.
Happy to.
Oh, thank you so much. All right. Stay tuned to see what's coming up in the area this week, and I will see you next Sunday.